What happened to the missing person from school? When Principal Giles came on the morning announcements and said nobody could walk home alone after the tragic events at Friday's football game, I had no idea what he was talking about. I'd skipped the game to play video games and figured maybe there was a fight or something. All students must have a direct ride to their houses, he said in that serious voice he only used for real emergencies. No exceptions. Everyone in my chemistry class started whispering and checking their phones. I leaned over to ask Brandon what happened, but he just shook his head and looked worried. That's when I noticed Veronica's seat was empty. Veronica never missed school. She was the type of person who showed up with pneumonia and still aced every test. Varsity cheer captain and headed for valedictorian. We used to build blanket forts together in elementary school, but hadn't really talked since freshman year when she got popular, and I stayed invisible. At lunch, I found my friend Maya and asked if she knew what happened to Veronica. Her eyes got huge, and she pulled me to a corner table. "You seriously don't know?" she whispered. "That's why we can't walk home alone." My stomach felt weird. Veronica wasn't the type to cause drama. Her mom had split when she was 12, so she basically raised her two younger brothers while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. She worked at the movie theater on weekends to save for college. Running away or doing something crazy just wasn't in her DNA. Halfway through lunch, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hey, it's V. Don't tell anyone. You're the only person I can trust. Meet me at the old food mart on Riverside at 4 o'clock. My hands started shaking. The abandoned supermarket had been closed for 3 years. Why would perfect, responsible Veronica want to meet there? I thought about showing someone the text, but something made me keep quiet. The rest of the day crawled by. Teachers kept stopping mid-sentence like they wanted to address what happened but couldn't. Police cars were parked outside the main entrance. When the final bell rang, everyone rushed to find their rides while I waited for my mom. She pulled up 20 minutes late as usual. I told her I needed to go to Brandon's house for a group project, and she dropped me off without asking questions. As soon as her car turned the corner, I started walking toward Riverside. The food mart was only a mile away, but it felt like 10. The parking lot was empty except for weeds growing through cracks in the asphalt. Most of the windows were boarded up and graffiti covered the walls. I pushed through the broken automatic doors and called out Veronica's name. "Back here." Her voice came from somewhere deep in the store. I followed the sound past empty shelves and displays filled with dust. My shoes crunched on broken glass. In what used to be the bakery section, I found her sitting on an overturned shopping cart. Her cheer uniform was torn and dirty. Dark circles made her eyes look hollow. Before I could say anything, she jumped up and hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. She smelled like sweat and something metallic. When she pulled back, I saw dried blood under her fingernails. "What happened to you?" I asked. Instead of answering, she turned and pointed to the corner. That's when I saw the duffel bag. It was unzipped just enough to show stacks of cash bundled with rubber bands. More money than I'd ever seen in real life. Movement behind the bag caught my eye. A man was lying on the floor with rope around his wrists and ankles. Duct tape covered his mouth, but his eyes were open and staring at me. He was wearing a referee uniform from the football game. Veronica followed my gaze and shrugged like this was totally normal. She picked up a piece of rebar from the floor and tested its weight in her hand. "That happened," she said. My feet stayed glued to the floor while Veronica kept testing how the rebar felt in her hands. The referee started making these loud sounds through the tape, and his eyes looked crazy mad. Veronica turned those empty eyes on me and said we had to figure something out fast because she couldn't let him go yet. My brain felt like it was spinning in circles trying to understand what was happening. I finally got my voice working and asked her what went down at the football game on Friday. She started walking back and forth around the referee like some kind of angry tiger. She told me she saw him taking a fat stack of money from someone under the bleachers during halftime. When she went over to confront him about it, everything went bad real quick. The referee's eyes tracked every move we made while Veronica kept talking. She explained how he grabbed her arm hard when she said she was going to tell Principal Giles about the money. She hit him with a metal pole from the equipment shed and took off running. Somehow he followed her all the way to the food mart, which made no sense. My pocket started buzzing like crazy, and I pulled out my phone. 12 missed calls from my mom, plus a bunch of texts asking where I really was. My hands shook bad while I typed back that I was still at Brandon's house working on our science project. The lie made my stomach feel sick, but I couldn't tell her the truth right now. Veronica walked over to the duffel bag and pulled it open wider to show me what was inside. There had to be at least $50,000 in there, all wrapped up in rubber bands. She said the referee dropped the bag when she hit him with the pole, and she grabbed it while running away. A car engine rumbled outside, and we both froze like statues. The sound got closer, then passed by the parking lot without stopping. Veronica grabbed my arm so hard it hurt, and said we couldn't stay here much longer. Someone was definitely going to come looking for either the referee or all that money. My brain kicked into problem-solving mode, and I suggested we call 911 from a payphone or something. Veronica shook her head so hard her dirty hair flew around. She reminded me that she hit him first and took his money, so nobody would believe it was self-defense. The referee started pulling against the ropes and making angry sounds again. Veronica picked up the rebar and walked toward him, which made him stop moving immediately. That's when it hit me that she wasn't dangerous or crazy, just really scared. But scared people sometimes do things they can't take back, and that worried me bad. Out of nowhere, Veronica dropped the rebar and started crying hard. Tears made tracks through the dirt on her face while she told me her brothers were home alone right now. If she got arrested, they would go straight into foster care since their mom hadn't sent any money in 2 years. The whole situation was getting worse by the minute, and I didn't know what to do. I walked over to the referee and suggested we at least untie his legs so his blood could flow better. Veronica thought about it, then nodded and helped me loosen the ropes around his ankles. The referee tried talking through the tape, but all we could hear were angry mumbling sounds. His face was turning red, and I worried he might have a heart attack or something. Veronica sat down on the dirty floor and put her head in her hands. I'd never seen perfect Veronica look so broken and lost before. The abandoned store felt colder and darker with every minute that passed. Dust floated in the air, making me want to sneeze, but I held it in. The referee kept staring at us with those angry eyes like he was memorizing our faces. I knew we were in serious trouble, but didn't know how to get out of it. Veronica's phone buzzed, and she jumped like someone shot her. She looked at the screen, and her face went even paler if that was possible. She showed me a text from an unknown number that said they knew where she was. My whole body felt cold reading those 4 words on the screen. We both looked toward the boarded-up windows, expecting someone to burst in any second. The referee made a sound that almost sounded like laughing through the tape. Veronica stood up and started shoving the money back into the duffel bag with shaking hands. She said we needed to move him somewhere else in the store right now. I helped her grab the referee under his arms while she got his legs. He was heavier than he looked, and we struggled to drag him toward the back. We found an old storage room that still had a door that locked from the outside. After pushing him inside, Veronica used a broken mop handle to jam the door shut. The referee kept making noise, but at least it was muffled now by the door. Veronica grabbed the duffel bag and we ran toward the front of the store. My heart was beating so hard I thought it might explode out of my chest. Every shadow looked like someone waiting to grab us. Every sound made us freeze and listen. This whole thing had turned into a nightmare, and I had no idea how to wake up from it. Veronica suddenly stopped running and pulled out her phone with shaking fingers. She scrolled through her messages and turned the screen toward me to show a text from Friday night. The unknown number had sent it at 8:47 p.m. during the game, and it just said, "Mind your own business or else." The timestamp matched up with right before she saw the referee getting money under the bleachers. My eyes went back to the storage room door where we'd locked him, and that's when I noticed something sticking out of his back pocket. It wasn't a regular phone, but one of those cheap burner phones you can buy at gas stations with cash. I pointed it out to Veronica, and her face went white because we both knew what that meant. Nobody carries a burner phone unless they're doing something illegal that they don't want traced back to them. We looked at each other, and without saying anything, we both walked back to the storage room. Veronica kept watch while I carefully reached through the gap we'd left in the door and pulled the phone from his pocket. The referee made angry sounds and tried to twist away but couldn't move enough to stop me. The phone had no password and showed dozens of texts with code words and numbers that looked like betting amounts. We went through his other pockets more carefully this time and found stuff we'd missed before. There was a second set of car keys with a bright yellow tag from one of those rental places at the airport. Veronica held them up and said his regular car was probably still sitting in the school parking lot. That meant he'd planned to switch cars after the game and disappear before anyone noticed the money was gone. A loud thumping sound made us both jump and duck down behind some old shelves. The helicopter passed right over the store, and we could hear the blades cutting through the air above us. It was probably just the traffic helicopter from the news station, but we stayed frozen for a full minute after it passed. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat, and Veronica's hands were shaking bad. The fear was making us paranoid about every little sound and movement outside the store. Veronica grabbed my arm and pulled me back to where the duffel bag was sitting. She told me the man she'd seen giving money to the referee wasn't just some random person. It was Theodore Hancock, who owns that huge car dealership on the highway with all the fancy commercials. She'd seen him at every single football game sitting in the VIP section with the other rich people who donate money to the team. Her voice got quiet when she explained how he always acted like he owned the place, and coaches would bend over backwards to keep him happy. While she talked, I unzipped the bag wider and started taking pictures of the cash with my phone. The bills were wrapped in bundles of hundreds, with little paper bands that had numbers written on them. I made sure to get clear shots of the serial numbers on several bills from different bundles. If we had to give this money back or turn it over to someone, we'd at least have proof of what was there. Veronica kept looking toward the windows and the door while I worked through photographing the evidence. We could hear the referee making noise again from the storage room, and it was getting louder. The tape must have been coming loose because suddenly we could make out actual words. He was yelling that we had no idea who we were messing with, and Theodore had people everywhere. He said Theodore owned half the cops in town, and nobody would believe 2 kids over him. His voice got mean when he said they'd make us disappear just like they did to people who crossed them before. Veronica's face looked scared but also mad as she grabbed the roll of duct tape. She marched back to the storage room and I heard the sound of tape being ripped off the roll. The referee tried to keep talking, but his words got muffled again as she put fresh tape over his mouth. When she came back, her hands were shaking worse than before. She admitted that lately some teachers had been giving her weird looks at the school, like they knew something she didn't, or were watching her for some reason. It made sense now if Theodore really did have connections everywhere, including at the school. We both realized the money couldn't stay where it was because someone might know to look there. I helped Veronica lift the heavy duffel bag, and we started carrying it toward the back of the store. The old freezer section still had the big metal doors, even though the power had been off for years. We found one that still locked from the outside and shoved the bag inside behind some old boxes. The referee watched us through the doorway as we moved the money, and his eyes followed every step we took. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and when I checked it, there was a text from Maya. She was asking if I'd heard anything about Veronica because the police were at the school asking questions about her. They'd pulled a bunch of kids out of class to talk to them about Friday night. I showed the message to Veronica without responding to Maya. Veronica's face got even paler, and she said we needed to figure out what to do fast before things got worse. Veronica suddenly grabbed the referee's burner phone from where we'd left it on a shelf. She started scrolling through it again, and her face got excited when she found something. She turned the screen toward me and showed me video files saved in a folder called Games. We opened the first one and saw footage from last week's game against Central High. The video was taken from the field level and showed the referee making a call on a touchdown play. Even I could tell the receiver's foot was clearly out of bounds, but the ref signaled touchdown anyway. The next video showed him calling a fake penalty on our defense that gave the other team a first down. There were 6 more videos just like that showing obvious bad calls that changed the game scores. My hands got sweaty as I realized this was proof of everything. A siren wailed somewhere outside and we both froze like statues. The sound got louder and my heart started pounding, so hard I could hear it in my ears. Veronica grabbed my arm and we ducked behind some shelves as the siren got closer and closer. Then it started to fade as the police car or ambulance went past on the main road. We stayed crouched down for another minute before standing up again. Every little noise made us jump now, and I noticed I was sweating, even though the abandoned store was cold. Veronica walked back over to check on the referee, and I followed her. She looked at me with this weird expression and said the cheerleaders had been making jokes about games being fixed. She explained how they'd noticed weird patterns in the scores, but everyone just thought it was trash talk. Now she realized they'd been seeing the truth without understanding what it meant. A horrible choking sound came from the storage room, and we both ran over. The referee's face was turning red, and he was making these awful gagging noises. I panicked and ripped the tape off his mouth while Veronica loosened the ropes around his chest. He gasped for air and coughed hard for almost a minute. Then he looked up at us and immediately started talking fast about making a deal. He said he'd give us half the money if we let him go right now. Veronica shook her head and told him to shut up, but he kept talking. He said Theodore had been running this whole thing for 3 years. The rich car dealer paid refs to fix games so his gambling friends could win big bets. This $50,000 was just this week's payment, and there was way more money hidden around town. Veronica crossed her arms and asked why she should believe anything he said. The referee got this desperate look and told us to check the news from 3 years ago. He said another referee died in a car accident after refusing to fix a championship game. His voice got quiet when he said it wasn't really an accident. I pulled out my phone and started searching for local news from 3 years back. It took a few minutes, but I found the article about a referee named Tom Wilson. His car had gone off the Riverside Bridge on a clear night with perfect weather. The article said there were no skid marks and no explanation for why he lost control. I scrolled down to the comments section, and my stomach felt sick. People were saying it looked suspicious and asking why nobody investigated properly. One comment said Tom had been acting scared the week before he died. Another person wrote that Tom had tried to report something to the police, but nobody listened. Veronica read over my shoulder, and I could feel her shaking. We looked at each other, and I knew we were both thinking the same thing. Theodore might actually kill people who got in his way. Veronica started breathing really fast and put her hands on her knees. I tried to calm her down by rubbing her back, but I was just as scared. The referee saw how freaked out we were and started pushing harder. He said if we let him go right now, he'd forget this ever happened. He promised he wouldn't tell Theodore about us and would leave town tonight. Veronica stood up straight and pointed at him with a shaky finger. She reminded him that he already knew our names and what school we went to. He knew what we looked like and could find us any time he wanted. The referee's face changed when he realized his mistake. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to see a text from my mom. She wrote that she was leaving work early to pick me up from Brandon's house. My hands started shaking as I checked the time and saw she'd be there in 20 minutes. I told Veronica I had to go, but she grabbed my arm hard. Her eyes got huge, and she begged me not to leave her alone with him. She said she couldn't handle this by herself and needed my help. I looked at the referee tied up in the corner, and then back at Veronica's scared face. My mom would freak out when she got to Brandon's and I wasn't there. But I couldn't just abandon Veronica in this creepy place with a dangerous man and all that stolen money. The referee started laughing in this mean way and said we were just dumb kids who didn't know what we were doing. He said Theodore had cops and judges in his pocket and nobody would believe us anyway. Veronica picked up the rebar again, and he shut up real fast. I looked at my phone and saw I only had 15 minutes to figure something out. Veronica was still holding the rebar and staring at the referee who had gone completely quiet now. I told her I'd run out and catch my mom before she got to Brandon's house, but Veronica grabbed my wrist hard. She said she couldn't stay here alone with him for another hour and started breathing fast again. I pulled her to the side and we worked out a quick plan where I'd tell my mom I walked to get food. Veronica would keep watch over the referee for just one more hour, and then we'd figure out what to do next. She nodded, but her hands were still shaking bad. As I started heading for the door, Veronica suddenly grabbed the referee's burner phone from his pocket. She held it up and hit the record button, then walked over to him with the phone pointed at his face. She told him she'd loosen the ropes around his chest if he talked about the game fixing on camera. The referee looked at the phone, and then at the rebar she was still holding. He started talking fast about how Theodore paid him $5,000 per game to make bad calls. Veronica asked him who else was involved, and he listed names while she kept recording. I wanted to stay and watch, but my mom would be at Brandon's any minute. I ran through the broken doors and across the empty parking lot as fast as I could. My shoes slipped on the loose gravel and I almost fell twice. The main road was about 300 yards away through an overgrown field. I pushed through the tall grass and weeds, getting scratched by thorns and branches. A car horn honked just as I reached the sidewalk, and there was my mom's car pulling up. Her face was red, and she looked more worried than mad when I got in. She started yelling about how the whole town was looking for Veronica, and everyone was scared. She said there were police everywhere, and parents were keeping their kids home from the school tomorrow. I mumbled something about being hungry and walking to get snacks, but she wasn't really listening. She kept talking about how dangerous it was to be out alone right now. The drive home felt like it took forever while she lectured about safety and being honest with her. I stared out the window at the houses passing by and felt sick to my stomach. I'd left Veronica alone in that creepy store with a tied-up man and $50,000 in cash. What if Theodore's people showed up while I was gone? What if the referee got loose somehow? My mom pulled into our driveway and I went straight to my room without eating dinner. I locked the door and pulled out my phone to text Veronica that I made it home safe. She texted back right away with a photo that made me sit down hard on my bed. She'd moved the referee into what looked like a storage closet and put a heavy shelf in front of the door. The photo showed him sitting on the floor with his hands still tied, looking tired and defeated. She said she could watch him from outside through a crack in the door. I stayed up staring at my computer screen and searching for everything I could find about Theodore Hancock. His car dealership website came up first with photos of him smiling next to expensive cars. Then I found articles about him sponsoring the football team and donating to the school. He owned 3 restaurants downtown and had invested in the new shopping center on Route 9. The more I searched, the more businesses connected to his name showed up. He basically controlled half the local economy, which explained why nobody ever challenged him. A news article from 5 years ago showed him cutting a ribbon at the hospital's new wing. Another showed him at a charity golf tournament with the mayor and police chief. Around 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Veronica. She said the referee had finally fallen asleep and she was going to risk leaving to check on her brothers. Her neighbor was supposed to be watching them, but she needed to make sure they were okay. We agreed to meet at the school early before anyone else got there, maybe around 6:30 by the gym entrance. I set my alarm for 5:45 and tried to sleep, but kept thinking about everything that could go wrong. When the alarm went off, it felt like I'd just closed my eyes. I got dressed in the dark and slipped out the back door before my parents woke up. The streets were empty and fog covered everything, making it hard to see more than 20 feet ahead. I jogged most of the way to the school and got there just as the sun was starting to come up. Veronica was already waiting by the gym doors, and she looked completely exhausted. Her hair was messy and she had dark circles under her eyes, but she managed a small smile when she saw me. She said her brothers were scared but safe, and she'd told them she was helping a sick friend all night. We needed somewhere private to talk, so we went around to the equipment room door that was usually left unlocked. Inside, it smelled like old rubber and sweat, but at least nobody would find us there. Veronica pulled out the referee's phone and showed me the full confession video she'd recorded. The referee's voice was clear as he named 6 other people involved in the game-fixing scheme. 2 of them were police officers, and 1 was a school board member I recognized from assemblies. He said they all got paid through Theodore's businesses with fake invoices and consulting fees. The video was almost 10 minutes long and had enough details to prove everything. I realized we needed real help from someone outside this town, but didn't know who to trust. Then I remembered my cousin Sarah, who worked as a lawyer in the city about 2 hours away. She'd helped my family with some legal stuff before and always said to call if we needed anything. Veronica agreed it was worth trying, but said we couldn't use our regular phones in case someone was tracking them. We left the equipment room and walked to the old gas station on Maple Street that still had a working payphone. I dropped quarters into the slot and dialed my cousin Sarah's number from memory while Veronica kept watch for anyone coming. Sarah picked up on the 3rd ring, and I rushed through everything that happened. Talking so fast, she had to tell me to slow down twice. She went quiet for a long moment after I finished, and then said we were in way more danger than we realized and needed the FBI, not local cops. But first we had to get somewhere safe with lots of people around. She said she'd leave work right now and drive down, but it would take at least 2 hours, and we should go back to the school and act totally normal until she got there. Before hanging up, she warned us not to go anywhere near the food mart, because Theodore's people were probably watching it by now, waiting for us to come back. We walked to the school trying to look casual, even though my legs felt shaky, and Veronica kept checking over her shoulder every few seconds. The morning bell hadn't rung yet, so we sat on the steps outside trying to blend in with other early students, while my stomach twisted into knots. When Principal Giles came on the morning announcements during first period, he said Veronica had been found safe, and everyone should return to normal schedules starting immediately. Veronica and I looked at each other across the classroom completely confused, because she never told anyone she was okay, or even contacted the school. Between first and second period, Brandon grabbed my arm and pulled me into an empty classroom, his face pale and sweaty. He whispered that his older brother worked at Theodore's dealership doing oil changes and had overheard phone calls about finding some missing money that Theodore was getting really desperate about. His brother said Theodore had been screaming at people on the phone and throwing things in his office all morning. I tried to act surprised and asked Brandon why he was telling me this, but he just shook his head and said to be careful before rushing out. Third period had just started when someone knocked on the classroom door, and Detective Macy Duran walked in wearing a gray suit and asked for Veronica to come with her for some routine questions. Veronica grabbed her backpack slowly and followed the detective out while everyone whispered and stared. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Veronica, saying the detective seemed suspicious, but wasn't pressing too hard yet, just asking general questions about where she'd been and if she was okay. During the passing period before fourth period, I watched from the second-floor window as a black Mercedes pulled into the visitor parking spot, and Theodore's associate Colt Richards got out wearing an expensive-looking suit. My stomach dropped as he walked straight toward the main office with quick, angry steps. I ducked away from the window and hurried to my next class, trying not to think about what he might be doing in the principal's office or who he might be asking about. At lunch, Maya found me hiding in the back corner of the cafeteria and sat down with her tray, leaning in close to whisper. She said reporters were starting to sniff around the game-fixing rumors, and some journalist named Liliana Cross had been outside the school this morning, asking students if they'd noticed anything strange about recent football games. Maya said the woman seemed really interested when kids mentioned how many upsets there'd been this season and how the refs made weird calls at important moments. I nodded and tried to look interested while really watching the cafeteria doors for Veronica to come back from the office. She finally showed up looking shaken and pale, sliding into the seat next to me and grabbing my arm under the table. She whispered that Detective Duran had asked specifically about the food mart, saying someone reported seeing students there yesterday afternoon. The detective had let her go with just a warning to be careful and stay away from abandoned buildings, but Veronica could tell she knew more than she was saying. My phone vibrated with a text from my cousin saying she was an hour away and had already contacted a trusted FBI agent who specialized in corruption cases involving minors. She said we just needed to keep our heads down and stay in public places until they arrived to help us. The rest of the afternoon dragged by with me jumping every time someone walked past the classroom door or a phone rang in the office. When the final bell rang, I grabbed my stuff and met Veronica by her locker, both of us trying to act normal while everyone rushed past us to get to buses or cars. We walked toward the student parking lot, and I spotted Colt Richards standing by an expensive car, talking to 3 football players, showing them something on his phone. One of the players looked up and pointed directly at us, making Colt's head snap around to stare in our direction. We quickly ducked behind a school bus before he could get a good look at us, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. Veronica grabbed my hand and we stayed crouched behind the bus for what felt like forever, listening to voices getting closer, and then finally moving away toward the gym. We stayed crouched there for another minute before peeking around the bus to make sure Colt was really gone. The parking lot was clearing out fast with only a few cars left near the gym entrance. Veronica's hand was still gripping mine so tight it hurt, but I didn't pull away. We made our way back toward the main building, ducking behind cars and trying to look normal whenever someone walked by. The library was on the second floor with big windows facing the parking lot and security cameras at both entrances. We slipped inside and found a table in the back corner where we could see both doors but stay mostly hidden behind the stacks. Veronica pulled out her phone and called her brother's elementary school, telling them she was running late, but the aftercare program should keep them until she got there. Her voice shook a little when she asked them to double-check that both boys were signed in and safe. While she talked, I kept watching the doors and checking my phone for updates from my cousin. She texted that she was 45 minutes away now and bringing someone who could help. The library was almost empty except for a few kids doing homework and the librarian sorting returns at the front desk. Every time the door opened, my whole body tensed up. About 20 minutes passed before I saw movement outside in the hallway. Theodore Hancock was walking past the library windows with Principal Giles right beside him. Theodore's face looked calm, but his eyes were scanning everywhere like he was hunting for something. Or someone. They stopped right outside the library door, and I could see Principal Giles gesturing like he was trying to explain something. Theodore just nodded and pushed through the door, his eyes sweeping across the room. When he spotted us in the corner, his mouth curved into this cold smile that made my skin crawl. He said something to Principal Giles, and they both started walking toward our table. Veronica grabbed my wrist under the table as they got closer. Theodore pulled out a chair and sat down across from us while Principal Giles stood awkwardly behind him, looking really uncomfortable. Theodore leaned forward and spoke just loud enough for us to hear, saying he knew we had something that belonged to him and suggesting we could all benefit from a quiet resolution. He mentioned generous donations to our college funds if we returned his property with no questions asked. His voice was smooth, like he was offering us candy, but his eyes were hard and threatening. Before either of us could respond, the library door opened again, and my cousin walked in wearing her lawyer suit. Right behind her was a woman in a dark blue suit who reached into her jacket and pulled out a leather wallet, flipping it open to show an FBI badge. Theodore's face went completely white, and he stood up really slowly, his hands flat on the table. He told Principal Giles they should continue their conversation another time and started walking toward the door. The FBI agent stepped sideways to block his path and introduced herself as Special Agent Delgado, saying she'd been investigating him for months, but needed witnesses to make the case stick. She looked right at us and said our evidence could bring down the entire gambling ring that had been corrupting high school sports across the state. Theodore tried to push past her, but 2 more agents appeared in the doorway. Agent Delgado told us to gather our things because we needed to show them where the referee was being held. The drive to the food mart felt surreal with us in the back of an unmarked FBI car, while more agents followed behind. When we pulled into the abandoned parking lot, there were already 3 more government cars there with agents securing the perimeter. We led them through the broken doors and back to the storage closet where Veronica had moved the referee. He was still there, looking rough and dehydrated but alive, his eyes going wide when he saw all the federal agents. The moment they untied him, he started talking fast, saying he'd cooperate fully and tell them everything about the gambling operation. While agents photographed and cataloged all the cash from the duffel bag, the referee gave them names and dates going back 3 years, explaining how Theodore recruited refs and which games were fixed. One agent was typing everything into a laptop, while another recorded video of his confession. My phone buzzed with news that Theodore and Colt had just been arrested at the dealership, where they'd been trying to burn financial records in a metal drum behind the building. Detective Duran showed up about an hour later, and it turned out she was one of the clean cops who'd been secretly helping the FBI investigation. She pulled Veronica aside and apologized for the scary questioning earlier, explaining she had to be careful not to tip off the corrupt officers in her department who were getting paid by Theodore. She'd been walking a tightrope trying to protect us while not blowing her cover. That night, they arrested the school board member at his house and found a safe in his basement with stacks of cash that matched the serial numbers I'd photographed on my phone. Principal Giles was cleared of any involvement, but looked completely shaken when he learned how close the corruption had come to destroying everything he'd worked for at the school. 2 days later, Liliana Cross got permission from the FBI to interview us for her story about the gambling ring. She'd been investigating rumors for months, but couldn't get anyone to talk on record until now. Her article exposed how Theodore's operation had spread across 3 counties, targeting refs and coaches to fix games so his gambling partners could make millions. The story went viral and led to new oversight policies for high school athletics throughout the state. The next few weeks were crazy with lawyers and FBI agents coming to my house almost every day to prep me for testimony and go over every detail of what happened. Veronica's lawyer said the prosecutor wasn't going to press any charges against her since the referee grabbed her first, and she was defending herself. Plus, she helped expose the whole gambling thing that had been going on for years. The FBI got her approved for some special witness protection fund that would pay for her and her brother's living expenses while the case was going through court. When my mom finally found out the whole truth about what really happened, she sat at the kitchen table for like 20 minutes, just staring at me without saying anything. Then she hugged me super tight and said she was proud, but also grounded me for a whole month for lying about going to Brandon's house. She started picking up Veronica's brothers from their elementary school every day and taking them to our house until Veronica got out of her meetings with lawyers, which helped Veronica focus on the case without worrying about them constantly. The referee ended up making a deal with the prosecutors where he'd testify against Theodore and tell them everything about the gambling operation in exchange for a lighter sentence and getting into witness protection. During his testimony, he dropped this huge bomb that 3 other refs who wouldn't go along with fixing games had died in weird accidents over the past few years, including that one who went off the bridge that we'd found articles about. One ref supposedly fell down his basement stairs and broke his neck. Another had a heart attack at 35 with no history of heart problems, and the third got hit by a car that never stopped while he was jogging early one morning. About 2 months after everything went down, Veronica got this letter saying she'd been awarded a full scholarship to the state university from an anonymous donor who'd read about her story in the news. She was pretty sure it came from families whose kids played on teams that lost games because of the rigged calls, but the letter didn't say, and the lawyer handling it wouldn't tell her who set it up. The money covered everything, including housing and books and even a meal plan so she wouldn't have to work during school. Theodore's trial took forever with all these delays and legal stuff I didn't really understand. But 6 months after we first found that referee tied up in the food mart, he finally got convicted on federal racketeering charges and conspiracy and a bunch of other things. The judge gave him 15 years in federal prison, and the whole gambling ring got completely taken apart, with new rules put in place to watch high school sports for any signs of fixing. Veronica and I stayed really close through the rest of junior year and into senior year, texting pretty much every day and hanging out on weekends when she wasn't busy with her brothers or therapy appointments. The witness protection money let her get a decent apartment near school and hire a babysitter for her brothers when she needed to study or go to her counseling sessions, which she said were helping her deal with everything that happened. Her brothers were doing way better too, with the stable home and not having to worry about money all the time. During senior year, I applied to colleges with plans to study criminal justice because working with those FBI agents made me realize that's what I wanted to do with my life. My cousin who'd helped us that day pulled some strings and got me an internship at the federal prosecutor's office for the summer after graduation, which would look really good on my resume. I got accepted to 3 schools but picked the one closest to where Veronica was going, so we could still hang out sometimes. Graduation day was weird because everyone knew our story from all the news coverage, but most people didn't really know what to say to us about it. Veronica gave a speech as salutatorian and thanked me in front of everyone for being there when she needed someone, which made my mom cry and take like 50 pictures. That summer I worked at the prosecutor's office, mostly filing papers and getting coffee, but sometimes they'd let me sit in on meetings about cases, which was really cool. Veronica spent the summer getting her brothers ready for her to leave for college and making sure the babysitter knew their routines and stuff. The last week before she left for school, we hung out almost every day, going to movies and getting food and just talking about everything that had happened and how different our lives were now compared to a year ago. She dropped her brothers off at my house the morning she was leaving for college, so my mom could watch them while she drove up to campus and got settled in her dorm. About a week into the semester, I was sitting in my own dorm room trying to figure out how to work the laundry machines when my phone buzzed with a text from Veronica. It was a selfie of her standing in front of some big university building with her backpack on and a huge smile on her face, and all the message said was, "We made it." I smiled looking at the picture, because we really had made it through something that could have destroyed both of us, and now we were starting these new chapters of our lives, but still connected by everything we'd survived together. Thanks for sticking with me through all this. It's definitely been a ride sharing these moments together. I'll see you around next time. Like the video, it helps more than you think.